Hey guys, we're Tim and Katie.
And today we're going to show you how we built and installed these upper cabinets into our Ford Transit.
The first step when doing your overhead cabinets is to get your template. I did this by bringing out a piece of cardboard and using a scribe, so just like a circular lid, and I stuck a pen through the middle of it, and then I held up my cardboard against the wall, let the edge of the lid go up like this, and trace out the angle. When I got close, I converted it onto some cheap 1/4-inch plywood. The measurements that we're using ourselves are 12.5 inches along the bottom, 13 inches tall, and then our door is going to be 5/8 of an inch thick, so it's almost perfectly symmetrical. So we're going to trace our template onto the 1/2-inch Baltic birch. We're going to have 3 uprights, one on each end and one in the middle. Because we want the end of the cabinet to be seamless, we're going to make it the full size, so full 13 inches. Same with the one on the opposite end, but the one in the middle, we're going to make shorter by 1/2 inch so that the board can run continuous, so you don't have a seam.
So Tim is now going along the edge of the template here, but has angled his chop saw so that it has a perfectly straight cut.
That side for that side.
Now I'm pocket holing the middle support, which will connect to the bottom part of the cabinet.
We have our 3 uprights ready to go. We're just going to set up the table saw and take a 12.5-inch strip for the entire bottom of the cabinet, and then we can start putting it together. The entire
cabinet.
Stop it. The entire upper cabinet is 46 inches long, and obviously these are 1/2 inch on each side. So we just want this piece to be 45 inches.
We used wood glue and pocket screws to secure this upright onto the base piece, creating 2 equally sized cabinets. Now we are securing the 2 end pieces, making sure that the bottom is completely flush and doesn't stick past the base piece. Quick little measure to make sure everything is even and square. We're installing recessed pot lights in our kitchen cabinet, so we'll have 2, one on each side. So I'm just going to divide each section by 2 to find the center, and that's where we will drill them out, and then router along the back where the wire will sit.
So when you're using a drill bit or in particular a hole saw bit, it likes to cut and splay or kind of rip the wood as it comes through. So as you might have seen, we just did our pilot hole from the top. You can use a smaller bit if you want, but we just used the hole saw bit, did a pilot hole from the top, and then flipped it over and actually cut the other way.
So since the lights snap in from the bottom, these little arms come up and they will be sticking out through the bottom of the cabinet. So in order for them to actually lay flat, we are going to be using the router and creating a little bit of an indentation so they sit nice and flush. And now we go on to cut the pieces that will make up the back of the cabinet as well as the top of the cabinet.
Alright, we got our first backer piece. Let's see if she fits. Whew! Perfect. And then obviously it'll push these out a little bit.
And you have to be doing the light thing and the router for the wire before you put this bit on.
Perfect. So we just angle it slightly to match the back, obviously, so it sits flush against the wall of the van. And then Katie will pocket hole 2 spots on each side, and then we'll glue, screw it in.
To minimize the holes that you have to fill, make sure that you do the pocket holes on the part of the cabinet that's not visible.
If, like us, you're using a pocket hole jig, one thing to note is that if you're using 1/2 inch and 1/2 inch and the 1-inch screws, if you use the 1/2 inch guide on the pocket hole jig, when you go to screw them in, they have a tendency just barely to poke through the other side if you tighten them all the way. So what we do is on the drill bit, where you mark 1/2 inch, we go just above it, so it's just a little bit shorter, and then you can tighten it all the way. Especially on the areas where they're on the outside of the cabinet where we're trying to hide the screws, it doesn't really matter to us if they just poke out just a hair. But on the inside, it's important that they go flush with the wood because we're going to wood fill it.
And now we're securing the top pieces, which are the same lengths as the respective back piece. Big test fit time.
How's it look? Good?
Looks good, yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
And you're probably wondering, why are you building your cabinet out of 1/2-inch Baltic birch? Lots of people use more 1/4 inch, but for us the Baltic birch really isn't that heavy. And as you can see, they're super strong. And we're gonna mount it by screwing it into all our furring strips, up, sides, all over. So we just, on our last van, we took it on forest service roads, dirt roads, didn't have any issue. So we just like the extra security for not that much extra weight.
Yeah, I would say 23 pounds. So our next cabinet is going to go all the way from the rear pillar to the shower. So it's 114 inches.
We are starting on the larger upper cabinet now.
Just like for the kitchen cabinet, the first step here is to cut the base to length. So for this long cabinet, we had to cut 2 pieces.
So we have our 5 template pieces cut. One of them is slightly longer, 1/2 inch longer. So it'll be laid out like this. Our 2 longer pieces, and then this longer template will go here, and it'll get pocket holed from both sides. So that's the only seam. Because our cabinet's more than 8 feet long, we have to have a seam in the middle, and so that'll be the one spot, and we'll just sand it down, try and make it look really smooth from the bottom. And then our dividers for our cabinets, we'll measure and we'll secure like this, and we will pocket hole this down into our bottom of our cabinet, and then we'll do the same thing at the end.
And that'll give us 4.
That'll give us 4 equal size cabinets, and then again we'll go and measure from bottom to bottom, and we'll get our upright and our top pieces that we'll pocket hole and attach to this after. So it should be really strong. For the driver's side of the van, because the main cable, we just tuck it up in that corner, we just cut this as a straight angle. This is really overkill, but just to be safe, we don't want anything touching that wire. Lots of room away from it.
We use the Craig 720 pocket hole jig to create the pocket holes in the uprights. Once those holes were all done, we spaced the uprights equally and secured them onto the bases with pocket hole screws as well as wood glue. In order to join the bases together, we tipped the cabinet on its back and lined up the seams perfectly, and then secured that last upright that traverses through the base, making sure that the bottom was completely flush so it would be seamless once the cabinet was finished. Big cabinet, the bases are in. Tim has drilled out the under-mounted lighting, and now he's just going in and routering where the little legs sit, as well as where the cord will sit. Just like we did for the kitchen cabinets, we cut appropriate size pieces for the backs, as well as the tops of each section, and secured those again with wood glue and pocket screws. We cut our top and back pieces to accommodate for the angle at the back of the uprights, so as you can see in the video there, they do not meet. There's still a spot where the cable will run, and we will cover with 1/4 inch plywood at the end here. You'll see in a minute.
Oh, that looks good!
What do we think?
Yeah.
Look at how the cable resides so nicely up there.
Besides, little home.
Oh yeah, that's nice, guys. That's nice.
We're
We're trying to finish up the cabinets today, and we are working on this little back portion, so in through here.
So for us, 2-inch wide strip with 45-degree angles on both sides fits perfectly in our kitchen cabinets. So look in here, and then we'll just be gluing those angled cuts onto the wood, and then putting some weight on top.
Putting some weight on top on another board, keep it secure. How do you feel about the situation?
Pumped. First order of business for today is to sand down all the areas where I wood filled in the cabinets, where the pocket hole screws were. So definitely takes a lot of wood filler because the holes are so deep, but very satisfying to grind them down and prep for paint. So I'll go in with 220 grit sandpaper to prep the Baltic birch surfaces. I should mention also I do sand the fronts, so the butt end of the plywood that's going to serve as the front of the cabinet. I sand it down so that you can't really see the ridges once I paint it. Very important step. Now where's my sander? Before I go in and paint, I'm gonna use Alex Fast Dry caulking just to make the seams nice and clean. It only takes about 20 minutes to dry, so by the time I go through all of the seams, I'm sure I can just jump right into painting. The cabinets are all sanded and also the Alex is all dry, so it's ready to paint. So I use the Bare Ultra Scuff Defense and Ultra Pure White for the inside of the cabinet. As far as tools go, I'll use a foam roller, quite high density foam. I found that doesn't leave much streaking if you're pretty careful with it. A 2-inch brush and then a big roller if I'm getting impatient. We'll see. But there's lots of angles in here, so the brush is key. The beginning always looks rough. I'm finished painting the inside of the cabinet, so this paint has to dry, and then I'll likely do another coat before they go into the van. Once they're in the van, obviously we have to screw them onto the wall, so I'm gonna have to wood fill those holes, and I'll just spot paint in there. Now I'm ready to start painting the areas of the cabinet that are going to be very visible. So the bottom of them and then also each side. So I will be using the same paint as I was using on the inside, just kind of like as a primer. I'm using white cabinet paint for like the 2 top coats, but I want to prepare the wood and make sure I don't have to do too many of the cabinet paint. Also, I should mention, when I wood filled the inside of the cabinet, I also did some wood filling on the outside of the cabinet. So the stuff I use is this DAP Wood Pro X. It goes on pink and dries natural, which is super handy because I know exactly when I can start sanding, or else I tend to do it too soon and then it ruins it and I have to redo it. First coat's all dry, so it's time to go in for coat number 2. Before we're going on with paint though, I'm going to take my 220 grit sandpaper and lightly sand all the surfaces just to make sure there are any bumps, all that kind of stuff can get removed before I go in with the cabinet paint. This is the paint that we use for the outside of the cabinets. It is the Bare Premium Interior Semi-Gloss Cabinet and Trim Enamel in white base. First coat of cabinet paint, second coat of paint altogether. I did end up using a high density foam roller. It's really small. I wish they came in bigger sizes. Maybe they do, but I have not come across one at Home Depot. This I find gives me a really smooth finish. The paint that I use, that interior cabinet paint, has a self-leveling component to it, so that also helps. But with the small brush, or the small roller, you really have to make sure that there aren't lines along the side because you're definitely having to do more runs through it. But first coat's looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with it. Now I'm going to let that dry and go in with my final coat in 2 hours. Alright, so cabinets just need to dry now, 2 hours, and then we are ready to hang them.
We got our shower up, so now we're going to try and bring in the big upper cabinet. We already put this 1/4 inch spacer back here. That's our 1/4 inch wall is going to be there. One thing with the recessed LEDs when you have the wires going out the back like this is you can't have that fall on a furring strip or it'll compress the wire and you'll have to notch it out or something, but we did just measure and double check. And thankfully it doesn't fall, none of them fall on any furring strips, so we don't actually have to wire it right now. We'll just get the cabinet up in place and then we can reach up like this, or the wires will hang down just slightly and we can finish the wiring after. You might be wondering how we're going to hang these cabinets. So obviously we got our 3/4 inch plywood furring strips, which are bolted onto the van with the cross nuts and these big M6 bolts. But now we are going to use number 8 countersink bit, and then we're going to use 1 inch number 8 screws through this, and then because we'll countersink them, Katie will be able to wood fill them after. So to get it up first here, we just need to mark out a couple spots that can act as kind of initial mounting points where we can just quickly put a couple screws in and then take some weight off and go through the whole thing.
Before hanging the cabinet, we did take photos of where the furring strips lie along the wall of the van and also along the ceiling, so we knew exactly where we would be able to screw into. With the cabinets in place, we were ready to start stripping the plywood for the faces. We measured each cabinet individually and cut one face at a time, and then measured to the next cabinet.
We've just been editing the cabinet video and realized we lost all our footage of the doors. So I wanted to show you how we do this part. This is actually on the next van. Basically, we aim for a 1/16 gap between each door front. So I just keep it closed. Here I'm at the end. And then I just subtract a 16th from whatever measurement I get here. And then same thing at the top. Even if I'm in the middle, I do the same thing. I take the measurement from the edge of the door. I put on one door at a time, take the measurement from the edge of the door, and then just subtract a 16th for the gap in the middle. And then for the upright, for the height, a little bit tricky. With these 110-degree Blum hinges, we measure from top to bottom and then just cut it like 1/32 short, because you want this little bit of a gap at the top so that when you open it, it doesn't rub on your ceiling. And this might vary a little bit if you have a completely flat ceiling, where ours is slight, it follows the curve of the van, which definitely helps when opening and closing our cabinet doors. Next, I want to show you how we mount the cabinet portion of the hinge. So we use the Craig guide at the 4-inch interval. What you're going to do is line up from the edge of that touching cabinet, and then again there's going to be a 1/16 gap, so I just put a mark at 4 and 1/16. Pretty small there. And then I do the same from the end of the cabinet on this side. So hold there. And then just 4 inches though, because there's not going to be a gap. The door is going to sit flush there. So 4 inches. And then this is the trickiest part, is how do you know, okay, so we know to center it on that line, but how do you know front to back where to put it? The exact measurement for a full overlay cabinet door like this is 37 millimeters. Converted that, it's just under ½ an inch. So I use a precision square. And mark on either side of that mark we made before at just under 1.5. Now we line it up so our first mark is right in the center, and then the lines that we did are in the center of the little holes. And then we take our ½ inch screws and pop these up there. Again, little line at the front, should be centered, and then we mark the depth of the screw at just past 1.5 there. There's the cabinet so far. You can see, this is what I was saying, you want a little bit of a gap at the top. We have them completely flush at the bottom, and then really nice, they don't rub on the ceiling at all, but you just have that consistent gap. Now we have our door cut, and we're ready to use the Craig hinge jig to install our Blum hinges. We'll say this is the top. We'll do it on this side. Really easy. There's pretty cool. They have 4 depth settings. We go at the shallowest setting. So I believe that's 3 millimeters, because we want our hinge to sit as close to the edge as possible. So it'll be full overlay. There's markings on the top from 4 inches, 3, 2, 1, how far you want your hinge to sit from the edge. So we use the 4 inches. So we just line it up with the edge here. Take our clamp. Clamp it there. I've already got it attached to the drill. You just put it in and turn it. Before you take it off, grab your other drill with a really small bit. This is like 1/16 drill bit. And do these pilot holes. You can't put a stopper on there, but you can see I've just got a super short drill bit, so it just bottoms out. It's perfect. We can take this off, do the other side, same thing. And they're in. One really important thing to note, if you want to use the Blum soft close hinges, they are ½ an inch, they sit ½ an inch deep. So we use 5/8 Baltic birch You can go thicker, but you will not be able to use 1/2 inch Baltic birch or 1/2 inch any other material with these hinges because they'll sit right through it. So the door's cut. We got our hinges on this side. We got the cabinet portion done. We're ready to go. Last thing, just with a Phillips screwdriver, they have these little adjustment screws on the hinges. This one right here is your, basically the up and down of like the height here. So we want to open that up as much as we can before we try and latch it. It'll make it much easier. Now we can go ahead and mount them. There's a little hook on the front here, so you kind of have to clip that in first in the front and then push the back of the hinge up. Just to go over this again, this screw kind of will make the shelf come lower or higher, closer to the ceiling. This one moves it forward and back. This one will go side to side. On to painting.
Once the faces have been hung up, I take them down and mark exactly which hinge belongs in which spot on the door. Then I prep them for paint by sanding with 150 and then 220 grit sandpaper. Once I've removed all of the dust, I'm going to go in with my cabinet paint and start on the inside of the faces using a high density foam roller. Once that first coat is done, I wait 2 hours and then lightly sand using 220 grit sandpaper and go in with a second coat of the cabinet paint. I should mention that I paint the edges of the faces at the same time as I paint the inside of the faces. That way, if any drips get onto the front, I can easily sand them down before painting and finishing the front, which is obviously the most visible part. On the fronts, I'm going to do basically the same process, except I'm going to start with a primer. I used the Bin 123 primer previously, and I liked that. This time I'm going to be trying the Kills 3 Premium Primer. That just prepares the surface, makes sure that no grain really shows through, or like a texture of the grain showing through. I'm popping this on. I'll just do 1 coat of that, and then I'll follow up with my 2 coats of cabinet paint. I will do a light sand in between. I basically just do the weight of the sander. I'm not pressing down. Alright, surfaces are all clean. Now I'm going in with my cabinet paint. And again, I'm going to be going with the grain. First coat is done. I tried my best to not leave any roller marks. I will go back again and sand down before I do the next coat. But it's looking pretty good. It looks nice and glossy. There are a couple spots where there's some air bubbles, so I might just blow on those to try to pop them, because the self-leveling, while it's wet, it can still kind of correct. So I'm going to do that in a couple spots. Time for the last coat of paint on the faces. So same idea, super light sanding and then going back in with the cabinet paint for the last time. I'll show you guys how it turns out. All right, here are the completed cabinets. They've got their 2 coats. They're going to be ready to hang back up from the same spots that I took them down from. It's been a while since I worked on the upper cabinets, but today I'm going to be finishing them off by installing the hardware. So that means the pulls and the slam latches, as well as the gas struts. So I'm going to start with the pulls. I did the 2 on the dinette side. I'm going to be showing you how I do it on the other side of the van. But super helpful tool is the Craig jig for this, for the pull latches. So basically you select your distance between the holes on your pull latches. So mine are 5 inches apart. So I just selected 5 inches, and then you can adjust where you want the holes to be relative to the edge of your cabinet. So you hook this on the lip of your cabinet, and then the holes line up exactly where you need them to be. I selected the 2-inch distance from the edge of the cabinet, and I wanted to have the handles nice and close to the base, because that is where the locks or the latches are going to be at the bottom. So when you pull, you want to have most of your force angled at the lock so you can actually unlock it. First thing you're going to do is measure your door width. So this one is 28 1/4. So I'm going to divide that by 2. So that's going to be 14 1/8. You're going to center that marked line right on that center hole. And then you're going to clamp it on using a jig, or using a clamp, sorry. I found that the inside of the cabinet was getting scratched by the metal, so I just put some paper towel over it. So I've got the set at 2 inches from the edge, okay, and then my 5-inch width for the pull handle. Okay, and then I'm lining that center hole up with my mark. Make sure that this is actually sitting flush and it didn't get shifted when you clamped it. Now you're going to take a 3/16 drill bit, and that is what you're going to use to drill the holes. And I'm going to use the impact set on 1. And that's how it looks. So I will repeat the same process for that one, and that one. Okay, the next step is installing the slam latches. Here's the slam latch. The hook part is going to be on the door portion, and then that rectangular catch piece is going to be on the inside. The way that you install these is you put them together, and then you make sure that that piece, this one that's going to be on the door eventually, sits completely flush with the front portion of the door here. So you want these somewhat centered, so I'm just going to measure the cabinet and find what roughly center is. So about 14. Number 5 screws here. Pan head would be best, just so you don't crack the latch. So lining that up so it's center. I found this awesome hack. I think it was from 70 Savage on YouTube on how to install these to make it really hassle-free and line up the catch with the lock portion. A lot of people do it by measuring, but I find that takes a really long time. So you get some Play-Doh and you put it approximately where you think that the door is going to make contact with the catch. Lock and catch both over there, and then that is where I believe the door is going to hit and make contact. So you want a decent amount of pressure, but you also don't want it to fall off. Yes. Okay. So there you go. And now you can see where those holes are. Then I used a screw to mark on the Play-Doh and then onto the wood where exactly the holes are going to need to go for the latch. See if it works. Let's go. Perfect. Here's a quick overview of the process. Find halfway, secure the latch and the catch together so that they're flush with the front of the cabinet. Put the Play-Doh on the front of the door to make those marks where the holes are going to need to be. Then mark the holes onto the wood, secure the latch, and you are good to go. And move on to the gas struts. We're using the Blum gas struts in our van, and it comes with this gas strut as well as the mounting hardware. It comes with the instructions on the bag here, but I didn't find it particularly helpful, so I came up with my own measurements that work with our particular cabinets. So I'll show you how I did it with the numbers that I used. I did all of the gas struts on the right side of the cabinets, and I'm going to measure 10 inches down from the top of the inside of the cabinet and just do a little mark. And that is going to be where the bottom of the circle piece is going to go. It's going to be in line with the 10 inches. And it's going to be 10 millimeters, so 1 centimeter in from the face. So I've got my precision square there. 10 millimeters in, 10 inches down to the bottom. And now I'm just going to mark the center of each hole. Then you're going to use the screws and just put them in your pre-drilled holes. To attach the gas strut onto the circular piece that you just installed, you're just going to take a flathead screwdriver and move that metal piece up a little bit. You don't want to take it off all the way. Good. And then it's secure. Now you're going to take your top bit, make sure that the flat end is going to be on the outside of your cabinet because the circular part's going to go on the other part of your gas strut. Don't snap them together because then you'll have to take it out because you can't screw it in while it's in position, but holding it together, you can figure out exactly how high the cabinet door is going to be. So for me, I want it near as close as I can get to the first one that I did. So I'm just going to make a mark there. Hold on, please. Sorry. You need to make sure that this clip is far enough in from the edge of the face so it doesn't hit your cabinet when you close the door. Now I'm going to pre-drill the marks that I just made. Make sure before you tighten the screws all the way, this piece is actually in proper position. There is wiggle room to shift it forward and backwards depending if it was too high or too low. This is in a proper position right now, so I've moved that piece up the same way as I did on the bottom, and then just clip it on and shift the piece back down, and then it should be good to go. I hope you found that video helpful. I've linked all of the products in the description below. Feel free to leave any questions, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and we will see you guys in our next video.